Subscribe, and let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in from.
The earliest surviving references to program AEM-9 appear in a partially burned ledger from 1974, where Indian geophysicists documented localized magnetic inversions occurring along the upper Himalayan ridgelines. The anomalies were not simple spikes but patterned fluctuations, forming cyclical waves that repeated every 19 days with uncanny precision. Scientists deployed portable magnetometers to remote valleys, many reachable only by pack animals or military helicopters, and the first field readings reported pulses strong enough to temporarily disable compasses, distort short-range radios, and, in one case, erase exposed film reels carried by the expedition's photographer. What unsettled the researchers most was the correlation that began to emerge. Each major surge aligned with the exact day that separate climbing teams across the region vanished without a trace. At first dismissed as coincidence, the pattern strengthened as AEM-9 continued. 6 disappearances in 2 years, each synchronized with what the internal reports labeled phase apex events. Yet none of the teams were found. Not even gear or shredded tents, only perfectly intact campsites with half-cooked meals, and abandoned notebooks mentioning brief bursts of metallic ringing in the air hours before they vanished. In 1977, a joint observation mission recorded what they described as a luminous distortion hovering above a glacier shelf, a shimmering oval whose edges flickered like heat haze, except the surrounding temperature was well below freezing. Before sensors could be recalibrated, the distortion folded inward and vanished, triggering a silent pressure drop that caused 2 members to collapse with temporary hearing loss. The incident report was flagged as Category V, non-atmospheric, a classification unique to AEM-9 and never seen in other Indian scientific archives. As the project expanded, the team discovered faint geometric alignments in the magnetic pulses, matching the coordinates logged by the missing expeditions. A hypothesis emerged that the anomalies were not natural at all but originated from a subterranean structure embedded deep beneath the Himalayan crust. The theory gained traction when seismic monitors captured a hollow resonance beneath one of the valleys, as if a vast chamber existed far below the permafrost. Before a full descent mission could be organized, a sudden fire destroyed the Diridan archive, storing 9 volumes of AEM-9 material. Officials blamed an electrical short, but witnesses reported seeing blue-white flashes inside the locked storage room minutes before the flames. After the archive fire, surviving AEM-9 personnel were reassigned to unrelated geological programs, but several privately kept logs resurfaced decades later, revealing far more than the public ever learned. One geologist described a classified 1979 expedition in which a portable field antenna detected a repeating signal buried within the magnetic pulses. The pattern consisted of 3 rising tones followed by a low sustained resonance, almost like a beacon call. Analysts discovered the frequency progression mirrored signal structures used in early deep space communication experiments, but compressed into rapid terrestrial bursts. Attempts to triangulate the source led them to a narrow ice corridor notorious for sudden storms. When the team arrived, they discovered a freshly collapsed crevasse exposing smooth, unnatural surfaces embedded in the ice, slabs of material resembling metallic stone, etched with parallel grooves spaced too evenly to be natural erosion marks. The slabs emitted faint warmth despite the cold, and instruments recorded micro-vibrations synchronized with the AEM-9 pulses. Before samples could be extracted, a violent magnetic surge erupted, knocking out all electronics and causing several members to black out. When they regained consciousness, the slabs were gone, the corridor walls resealed by fresh frost, and a low-frequency hum echoed through the valley for nearly an hour. Internal memos from the following months reveal that the Indian government secretly contacted foreign geophysicists, seeking collaboration under the guise of studying tectonic stability. However, leaked correspondence shows American and Soviet representatives advising immediate termination of the program, citing unpredictable environmental interactions and unverified intelligence as exhibiting territorial responses. The phrase, territorial responses, became a point of fear among AEM-9 veterans, many recalling strange sensory effects during fieldwork, moments where their vision would distort, or where shadows appeared to bend slightly toward the direction of the pulses. Some reported hearing whispers carried by the wind during surge peaks, though recordings captured nothing intelligible. By late 1983, researchers suspected the pulses were not only reactive but anticipatory, shifting moments before seismic fluctuations or imminent storms. It was as if something beneath the mountains sensed approaching change before instruments could detect it. In 1984, AEM-9 scientists launched their most ambitious survey, the Deep Aperture Test, a project involving synchronized magnetometer arrays spread across 5 valleys to capture a full 3-dimensional map of the anomaly field. For the first time, they successfully visualized the spatial structure of the pulses, concentric shells expanding and contracting around a central axis that did not align with any geological formation. Instead, it pointed toward a hidden depth, estimated at nearly 4 kilometers beneath the surface. When the final composite rendering was produced, engineers noticed an impossible detail. The fields were not spherical but helical, twisting like threads around an invisible core. This suggested the source was rotating or modulating in a way no natural magnetic phenomenon ever recorded had done. On the night of the 4th test cycle, the arrays detected a surge far beyond the known amplitude range, and for a brief 6 seconds, every sensor emitted the same pattern, 6 ascending tones, each higher than the last, ending with a sharp cutoff. Technicians believed it was a message, not noise. Minutes later, a shockwave rippled across the valley, subtle yet observable. Snow vibrated in fine ripples. Ice sheets cracked along straight geometric lines, and a warm breeze swept through the camp despite the sub-zero night. Then came the most chilling event. A faint human-like call echoed from the mountainside, repeating 3 times. It was captured on a backup tape, but analysts concluded it was not a voice. It lacked human harmonic signatures, sounding instead like an imitation synthesized from environmental resonance. After the incident, the program was shut down without explanation, and all remaining materials were sealed. Survivors of AEM-9 believe the shutdown was not due to danger but because the source beneath the Himalayas had begun responding too clearly. The official archive fire erased the 9 original volumes, but the forgotten logs that emerged suggest a deeper truth. Program AEM-9 did not merely measure magnetic anomalies, it made contact with whatever was producing them. And when that contact intensified, someone decided the world was not ready to learn what lived below the mountains. By early 1985, months after the abrupt shutdown of AEM-9, several former project members began noticing irregularities in their personal archives, missing notebooks, altered pages, and in one instance a cassette tape replaced with a blank reel, marked only by a single blue line. At first, they suspected bureaucratic cleanup, but the precision of what went missing was too targeted. Only materials referencing the helical fields, where the 6-tone sequence had been touched. One geologist reported finding strange mineral dust scattered across his locked office, analyzed later as a rare magnesium silicate composite identical to samples taken from the ice slabs that vanished during the 1979 incident. The implication was that whoever, or whatever, removed the AEM-9 records had direct access to the restricted sites, where those anomalous materials once appeared. Meanwhile, villagers in upper valleys began recounting new disturbances, distant droning sounds late at night, sudden aurora-like lights flickering against the ridges, and livestock behaving erratically during magnetic surges. A shepherd described watching a luminous thread drift across the snow, twisting in the wind before disappearing into a fissure. When he approached, he found the surrounding ice warm to the touch and humming faintly. Independent mountaineers also reported compass failures far outside the known anomaly zones, suggesting that the pulse field had expanded. A leaked government letter from 1985 warned ministries to avoid unnecessary operations in those regions due to unpredictable subterranean influences. Experts who reviewed the language noted it resembled terminology used when dealing with unstable experimental reactors, not geological hazards. At the same time, a researcher who attempted to replicate the field models on a home computer found that every simulation ended with the same unexpected result. The helical pattern coalesced into a single vertical line, as if the pulses were converging toward the surface. The model predicted a potential breakthrough point, a site where the central axis might rise closest to ground level. That coordinate matched a glacial basin, where an entire climbing team had disappeared during the program's early years. When the researcher returned to that location in secret, he discovered deep parallel gouges carved into the ice, too clean to be natural, leading into a narrow passage that emitted a rhythmic vibration identical to the one captured during the drone anomaly in the earlier decade. Before he could investigate further, the vibration ceased abruptly, and the air pressure dropped so sharply he nearly collapsed. He fled the area, convinced that the anomaly was not dormant but preparing for some form of emergence. Decades later, in the mid-2000s, declassified diplomatic cables revealed that both the United States and the Soviet Union had quietly monitored AEM-9's region throughout the 1980s, deploying long-range electromagnetic sensors under the guise of weather research. One cable from 1984 described a deep harmonic source of non-terrestrial profile, a phrase analysts still argue was either mistranslation or deliberate understatement. Another cable referenced pattern reinforcement behavior, implying the pulses grew more structured when monitored, as though reacting to observation. Around the same period, satellite images captured a circular deformation in the snowpack above the suspected axis point, an imprint nearly 60 meters wide, forming overnight despite no storms or known movement. Indian intelligence dismissed it as a shadow artifact, yet later scans showed microscopic metallic particles scattered around the perimeter, chemically similar to meteorite fragments but containing alloy traces unknown in aerospace manufacturing of any nation at the time. As global interest grew, an unauthorized expedition in 2007 attempted to drill into the suspected chamber. Their logs, leaked online years later, described the drill suddenly losing resistance at a depth far shallower than expected, followed by an eruption of warm vapor that carried a low, melodic hum. The hum remained audible even after the vapor dissipated. Hours later, their satellite phone received a repeating sequence of 6 compressed tones, the exact AEM-9 message pattern recorded in 1984. Panicked, the team evacuated, but 2 members reported intense vertigo and brief hallucinations of fractured light moving beneath the ice. Medical exams later revealed unusual electrical activity in their temporal lobes, with rhythmic spikes matching the pulse intervals. The expedition's equipment was confiscated upon their return, and customs officials claimed it tested positive for unstable ionized compounds, though none of the members had encountered any chemicals on site. Despite government denials, several universities began noting magnetic irregularities in Himalayan sensor arrays during the same period, subtle but systematic oscillations forming a gradually tightening helical loop, exactly like the 1984 models predicted. Scientists debated whether the anomaly was an artificial construct, a natural phenomenon, or an unknown hybrid process. Yet the growing coherence of the pulses suggested intelligence, or at least intent. And with each cycle, the loops drew closer to the surface, as if something below was tracing the boundary between the hidden and the known. By the early 2010s, hikers and climbers began encountering strange environmental distortions near the AEM-9 basin, areas where sound behaved unnaturally, muffling footsteps while amplifying distant echoes, patches of air that shimmered even in sub-zero temperatures, and sections of snow glowing faintly when photographed under long exposure. Social media posts documenting these anomalies were quickly removed, but archived caches show several images displaying the same pattern, curved streaks of light spiraling downward, matching the helix geometry identified decades earlier. A retired AEM-9 technician, after reviewing the photos, stated they resembled the phase bleed, described in a classified appendix now long lost. Around the same time, geological sensors registered a persistent low-frequency tremor originating from the anomaly's core region. Unlike typical seismic activity, the tremor held a stable rhythm, rising and falling in a controlled cadence, almost like breathing. The Indian Geological Survey attributed the disturbances to ice shifts, yet specialists noted that the timing aligned eerily with the original 19-day cycle, first observed in 1974. Reports also surfaced of strange physical sensations, among those visiting the upper valleys: sudden warmth, metallic tastes, mild disorientation, and in rare cases, spontaneous nosebleeds. One climber described feeling a soft pressure pushing against his back while standing at the basin's edge, though no wind was present. Another reported hearing her own breathing delayed by a fraction of a second, as if the air around her was responding after she inhaled. Meanwhile, a drone mapping team detected a transient electromagnetic spike directly above a narrow crevasse, and captured 3 seconds of distorted footage showing what looked like a rotating lattice of pale blue light embedded within the ice. Analysts claimed the image was corrupted data, except the rotational frequency of the distortion matched the exact value predicted by the helical field model for a surface-level emergence event. After this, unofficial expeditions increased, drawing thrill-seekers and independent researchers, many of whom reported losing GPS access within the anomaly zone. Several described hearing tonal sequences resembling the 6-tone message, but at a lower pitch, as if played from deep underground. It became clear that whatever lay beneath the Himalayas had grown stronger, more coordinated, and far less dormant than the government insisted. By 2020, the anomaly could no longer be dismissed. A multinational scientific team installing climate sensors recorded a sudden, powerful magnetic surge that temporarily disabled their instruments and shut down drones mid-flight. During the surge, The snow across the basin vibrated in concentric circles, radiating outward as if something massive shifted below. Then came the most dramatic event ever documented. A column of air above the basin twisted into a cylindrical veil of shimmering light, rotating slowly before collapsing inward with a silent implosion. The ground trembled, but not from impact, rather from a deep subharmonic resonance pulsing upward, measurable even 40 kilometers away. The event lasted only 14 seconds, but its aftermath was unmistakable. Geological teams reported that the anomaly's centroid, the deepest calculated point, had risen nearly 300 meters compared to its mapped location in the 1980s. This shift was impossible without catastrophic tectonic change, yet no such damage was detected. Instead, the pulses became more structured, forming what analysts called linguistic blocks, repeating harmonic clusters that resembled encoded data rather than random oscillations. Machine learning algorithms later applied to the waveforms identified non-natural signatures, patterns reminiscent of intention or dialogue. Several scientists privately concluded that the anomaly was not a geological event, nor merely a remnant of an ancient structure, but an active system, possibly a communication node or an interface from a civilization far older than human settlement in the region. When news of the event leaked, authorities established restricted zones, evacuating nearby villages under the pretext of landslide risk. Yet locals reported seeing search teams arrive with equipment unlike any civilian seismic gear. Sleek black containers emitting faint electromagnetic hums, guarded by personnel with no identifiable insignia. Some villagers spoke of hearing the six-tone message echo across the valley days after the government sealed it off. As of today, program AEM-9 remains officially non-existent, its recovered documents scattered, its surviving members sworn to silence. But the pulses have not stopped. They have become clearer, closer, and more deliberate, as if whatever lies beneath the Himalayas has begun looking upward again, listening, responding, and preparing for the moment when the boundary between depths and surface finally dissolves. Later internal testimonies from former AEM-9 field technicians painted a far darker picture than the benign geomagnetic observation program described in official communiques. Several recalled that by 1980 the team's portable magnetometers began registering pattern fluctuations that resembled not natural pulses but coded sequences, repeating in narrow frequency windows that would later match the harmonic profile of pre-disappearance distress beacons from the lost expeditions. One technician, identified only as RP, claimed that during a pre-dawn survey near the Triand Ridge he witnessed a column of distorted air rising from the scree slope, bending light in a way he compared to heat shimmer inside a prism. His companion insisted the effect was an illusion caused by altitude sickness, until their instruments froze simultaneously, displaying identical coordinates that did not correspond to any known point on the local map. When the data was transferred to the central lab in Dehradun, senior researchers allegedly locked the tapes in a sealed drawer and forbade further discussion. Weeks later, a directive arrived from the Defense Research Division ordering AEM-9 to avoid all unmapped valleys between the Lahal and Spiti ranges. The reason was never given, but the restriction zone overlapped precisely with every location where expeditions had vanished since 1973. Witnesses described strange administrative behavior after that. Personnel transfers with no explanation, shredded field reports left in open bins, and supervisors who openly admitted that they were ordered to stop interpreting anomalies, only record them. According to one surviving memo, the anomalies did not behave like magnetic events at all. They responded to proximity. Teams that approached within 60-80 meters experienced compass spirals, audio interference in radios, and in one case a sudden 11-second blackout, during which every wristwatch reset to 0 o'clock. What disturbed the staff most was that these events seemed localized to discrete points the researchers began quietly calling windows. By late 1980 the windows were appearing further south than ever recorded, encroaching on villages that had no history of geological instability.